Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the COVID-19 Unwinding webinar. There are a few housekeeping items that we would like to address before we begin. We are offering closed captioning for today's webinar. To access the closed captioning, you should look at the bottom right corner of your screen for the multimedia box. You will want to click on this box. You will then see the closed captioning begin. You may then select the language, font size, and color that best suits your viewing. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the OPWDD website. I will now hand this over to Anne-Marie Peterson, Associate Commissioner, to begin the webinar. Anne-Marie?
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. I wanted to just, extend our appreciation for you all coming together on such short notice. This is to continue our conversation regarding the unwinding activities after the conclusion of the PHE. And it is a follow-up conversation to the training conducted last week by Kate Marley and her team from the Division of Policy Management. We also had an earlier conversation with our CCOs regarding the prioritization of the unwinding activities, and we would like to communicate that with you today as well. We felt that, unpacking and prioritizing how we would go through this would ensure that we are responsive to our individuals, as well as making sure that we had capacity within the system to support day services needs. So without further delay, I think we can proceed with the next slide. And so how we started to look at prioritization is we started with our residential footprint and looked at the individuals in their billing for day services, day HAB, Prevoke, and community HAB R. We looked at individuals receiving those services from the residential providers, and we looked at the billing period from February 1st, 2022 through January 31st, 2023. And so this slide here kind of shows a perspective of that, where you can see that there is approximately 18,500 individuals unduplicated receiving these services, either day HAB, Prevoke, or COM HAB R. And then those are highlighted in the slate blue color. The yellow highlighted area here, which represents a total of approximately 7,200 individuals. This represents those individuals that are either 65 years or older, or based on their DDP-2 score, presents that they have some behavioral or medical complexity. We look at these individuals as the individuals that may qualify for in-residence COM HAB R. Remember, that is the new service that we had adopted in our waiver. And these individuals, if they choose to desire in-residence COM HAB R, may be eligible, and that would, and that we need to spend time to have conversations with them and understand what their next steps are. The last group is approximately 11,200 individuals. Those are in the salmon peach color here. Those are individuals that are not 65 years of age or older, are based on their DDP-2 scores, do not look like they have a behavioral or medical complexity that would qualify them for in-residence COM HAB R. And so we'd like to kind of talk further about how these different groupings, how we would prioritize to understand what they are looking for and needing post the PHE, and ensuring that our day service providers have the opportunity to evaluate their ability to meet those needs. So I think I could pass the the next part of the presentation to Alexis Harrington, who's also from SPS.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Next slide. All right, so on May 4th, at the end of PHE CCO webinar, we had started to note what the person-centered planning process would be as it relates to assessing appropriate day services moving forward and updating any changes to the life plan. But we did not go into additional detail on the reconciliation of services. So what we want to just explain is within reconciliation of services, that includes the person-centered planning process, and that is really to identify what the current needs and interests of people are. That may reflect what services people were receiving pre-pandemic. It may also be a change in services. Somebody's interests and needs may have changed since this end of the pandemic. This also includes updating life plans, as we noted, submitting service amendments or SARFs for new services, and that does include anybody who would be permanentizing their in-residence ComHab-R for anybody who is eligible. Just a note on those SARFs and the resulting NOD-09, those will only identify ComHab. It will not specify ComHab-R or in-residence. And just a note for the eligibility for in-residence ComHab-R, as Anne-Marie mentioned, this is really applicable to older individuals 65 and above, or adults with that medically frail or presenting complex behavioral needs. Just a reminder for everybody that anybody who is eligible and interested in receiving in-residence ComHab-R, there are process steps and an evaluation tool highlighted in 21 ADM 02, which needs to occur prior to submitting a SARF. Next slide. As noted on our May 4th webinar, by September 1st, the care managers must engage in a person-centered planning process. Leading up to that, there are a few deliverables for reconciling services based on the data that we reviewed in the beginning of the presentation. By June 30th, we will need to have reconciled services for anyone who is living in a certified program who is potentially eligible for in-residence ComHab-R. That is the approximate 7,000 who we referenced on our data slide. Prioritizing in order of pre-pandemic services within that 7,000 are anybody who was receiving day-hab or pre-voc outside of the home, anyone who was receiving day-hab in the residential setting, and anybody receiving ComHab-R outside of the home. Up next, by August 1st, we would need reconciled services for anybody who is not eligible for in-residence ComHab-R. That is the next bucket within that approximate 11,200 people that we reviewed on our second slide. And then again, by September 1st, that person-centered planning process must have been initiated and complete. It is important to note that unless we receive SARFs and DDP-1s, especially for anybody permanentizing their in-residence ComHab-R, there will be a mass auto disenrollment similar to the auto enrollment that was done in March of 2020. Next slide. So important day-hab and pre-voc provider timelines. We would expect that there's a confirmation of day program preferences for anybody who is not eligible for in-residence and ComHab-R living in a certified residence no later than August 1st. If anybody is not able to support someone's return to your program and you are not closing the day program for all, due process must be issued no later than August 30th. And if we do not receive a due process by that August 30th date, that will be confirmation that the provider does intend to support everybody who are residing in the certified residential program and that return to post-PHE flexibility, which is on November 12th. So we understand that some people may want a blend in residence and day services, and that would all be captured in the SARF that is submitted. We also recognize that there is a lot of planning, a lot of work and collaboration and coordination that goes into this process. So we would like to support this process however we can, including some mass enrollments with the DDP ones and mass disenrollment. So anybody who has a SARF and an NOD approval that is permanentizing their in-residence ComHab-R by October 1st will all be auto-enrolled into ComHab-R by OPWDD. We would also be disenrolling the Prevoke or DayHab services, and then this really just allows to understand what that capacity is going to be for the provider. So the reason why we're trying to establish all of these dates is to understand first who is going to stay within residence ComHab-R, to understand what that back end capacity will be for providers for anybody who is opting for that service. Anybody who is not reconciled by 10-1 will need the DDP ones to be submitted in that regular process. Anyone without a SARF and NOD approval permanentizing their in-residence ComHab-R will be auto-disenrolled on 11/12/23, and that is from their ComHab-R. And the reason why we had selected that 10-1 date, we understand that providers may need to really figure out transportation and bringing staffing back. This really gives the providers an opportunity to focus on these activities and allow us to support with the auto enrollments and disenrollments. And we will be notifying providers when the auto enrollments and disenrollments occur. So those are really the core areas that we wanted to cover today. We know that folks will probably have a lot of questions about this, so we do want to share our Day Community Services mailbox. If you can send your questions there, we would like to create a frequently asked question resource to support you all through this process. And because we have some time left, we are just going to mute ourselves and look through the questions that we received to see what we can answer for you today.
So we have a few questions here that I think we can answer. The first question was whether there would be an allowance for day rehabilitation in a certified residence due to weather. Generally speaking, the answer is no. The exception would be if there are circumstances where there is a state emergency declared, an ice storm or winter storm has happened in the past, in which case that might very likely be allowed, but generally speaking, without such action after the end of the Appendix K coverage on November 11th, there will be no additional delivery of day rehabilitation or pre-vocational services in certified residential settings. There's also a question here, what is the rate for Community Hab-R? We can put the link that's on the DOH website for mental hygiene rate settings, so we will put a link into the chat for folks, and they can go to that link directly to see the various rates for CHR. CHR is rated the same as Community Hab, but there are different rates for individual one-on-one versus group. So we'll give you that link.
There's a couple of questions in the chat I see related to the DDP2 scores and the SARF and related to ComHab that I can speak to. So, because we're not part of the person-centered planning team, we looked at the DDP2 score, the acuity scores under the behavior and subsets to see where it presented behavior, our medical complexity. We looked at the acuity 1 levels that we evaluate for high needs funding. And so that's kind of where we kind of got our numbers from as a general rule. Again, but the ability for in-residence ComHab is really driven utilizing the tool that's outlined in the ADM, and it's reflected in their life plan, where it discusses their desire for that service and then the medical and or behavioral complexity that they have that requires the benefit of in-residence services, or their age of being 65 years or older. So for the purpose of the SARF, we just evaluate ComHab generally. The R attached to ComHab just means that they're living in a residential certified residential program, which limits the authorization of ComHab hours to a maximum of 30 hours per week, Monday through Friday. So we are just looking at ComHab generally for the service itself, how it's delivered in residence in the greater community is driven by the treatment team and needs to be outlined appropriately within their life plan. So hopefully that provides the clarity on the SARF completion and how we will be evaluating that for issuing the NOD. And let me see if there was some other questions. Related to the billing components, there is billing codes for ComHab R versus ComHab for people that are not living in certified, and so those would be the codes that you would be doing. Related to the mass disenrollment dates, so there's 2 dates here, right? So once the reconciliation of the 7,000 plus, if that are potentially eligible for in-residence ComHab R, we're looking for those SARFs to come in as soon as possible. We have the June 30th date for the meetings to occur by. Our intention is to reconcile that for those that are eligible and interested in ComHab to change their date from what was historically. I should back up here. If you remember at the pre-pandemic, at the time the pandemic first issued, we did a mass enrollment based on temporary addendums in the life plan of in-residence ComHab R. That mass enrollment was 3/17/2020. What we'll be doing for those that are eligible and choose the in-residence ComHab R, we'll be rectifying that date with a 10/1/23 enrollment date for those that we have SARFs and NODs issued for. And if they choose to have the in-residence ComHab R full-time and not at a part-time basis, so for those people that are not looking for a blend, they're just looking for the in-residence ComHab R, we will be doing a disenrollment of their DayHab or Prevoke that they were previously receiving pre-pandemic, because that would be replaced with the in-residence ComHab R. We felt that disenrollment on 23 would allow the providers, you know, not needing to do a DDP1 removal. Then for, we do realize that there might be additional planning that needs to occur. So our disenrollment of those that were mass enrolled on 3/17/2020, if they do not have a SARF and an NOD issued by 11/11/2023, they will be disenrolled from the ComHab-R that they were enrolled in as part of the flexibility on 11/12/2023. Hopefully that is clarifying.
There's a question, can an outside, oh, sorry, Anne Marie.
No, go
Did you
ahead.
have one? We had
You go ahead.
Thanks. There's a question, can an outside provider provide ComHab-R in another provider's residence?
That is a great question. This is Kate Norley. So there is nothing from a state perspective that would preclude one provider from having their staff deliver services in another provider's residence. That said, it obviously would have to be approved by the residential provider, and there would have to be agreements regarding reporting of incidents, for example, or anything else. So while there is nothing that precludes it, it really would be up to the two agencies to make sure that that service arrangement was agreeable and appropriate.
There's a few remote questions. Will community pre-vote be allowed to be provided remotely after the end of the Appendix K, so as of 11/23?
Very good question. So we do have an ADM. Don't ask me the number, but it was released in 2021 that indicates which services can be delivered remotely via technology. Pre-vocational services are one of those services, so yes, it can be delivered remotely, but there is an important thing that people need to keep in mind. If that remote service delivery means that a person will be in their certified residence when they receive that service, that would be a no. So you have to qualify for both the remote service delivery, and the person needs to be in a location that is not the certified residence. So it could be, for example, a person at home, absolutely, in their own or family home, could indeed receive pre-vocational services remotely using technology as appropriate. And there is an ADM that governs that.
You can go ahead, Anne Marie, if you were going to speak to a question.
I just saw a question that says, can someone that was enrolled in ComHab prior to the pandemic just continue with it? And absolutely, right? So those individuals that were in ComHab prior to the pandemic, they wouldn't have that 3/17/2020 date. And if they're continuing to receive that out in the general community, that is fine. If they are looking to change that community HAB-R that was in the general community to in residence ComHab-R, either because of their age or behavioral or medical frailty, that needs to be reflected accordingly in the life plan prior to receiving it in that manner. So that's just the small caveat to that question.
Okay, there's a question here about people who are enrolled in an ICF and whether or not they can receive community HAB residential in the ICF, and the answer to that is no. So let's just back up the train a little bit with some building blocks. People in an ICF are not enrolled in the HCBS waiver, therefore, under no circumstances can they receive community HAB-R. That is a waiver service, and it is a service for waiver enrollees. Secondly, I just want to address it from the perspective of how someone in an ICF can receive supports during the day. And let's just take this sort of broadly. First of all, folks will remember that on May 11th, with the end of the federal PHE, the special provisions governing ICFs ended. We sent out a communication to all providers to clarify that end date, because it's really ahead of all the waiver end dates that will be coming up in November. So as of May 11th, a person who lives in an ICF can participate in an outside day treatment program, so they can leave their residence and go to day treatment. They can leave their residence and they can go to a day services program, which most typically in our service system is one that is certified as a day habilitation program, but where the ICF resident can receive active treatment at that day habilitation site. The other alternative is that the person receives in-residence day services, which is typically one where the person is not appropriate or cannot attend an outside day service, and then there is a rate that is established for ICFs to deliver that day service program. So for any provider that during the pandemic was delivering the ICF supplemental payment, that service allowance ended on May 11th, and beginning May 12th, the provider could be providing in-residence day services using the existing code at the same rate of payment as the special provision during the public health emergency. But a recent letter was sent out to that, and folks should review it. Any further questions can be sent to the People First mailbox, all one word, People First, waiver.ny.gov, or at opwg.ny.gov.
I do think because of the time, we should take the rest of the questions, and we'll be, putting out the Q&A to this. Does that make sense to everybody?
Makes sense here. I think we just want to thank everyone for their participation. Much appreciated. We will be posting the slides and the recording shortly, as was indicated in the announcement, to the special webpage that we have set up for Unwinding. And thank you very much to our presenters and all the staff that assisted with the logistics, and for all of you for participating this morning on such short notice. We thank you for your collaboration, and everyone have a great day.